Hi guys, and welcome back to City Skylines 2, San Francisco, the alternative version. This is episode 9, part 2. I'm your host and creator Legio, and I appreciate you being here. And hopefully you guys enjoyed part 1 enough to come back here for part 2. And if you did miss part 1, I suggest going back and checking it out. It helps part 2 make a little bit more sense. It's a little bit more sensible if you've seen it. So yeah, anyways, we're on to part 2, which is where we finish up the cargo hub, and we also revisit some other spots in the city. Again, I said it in episode 1, or in part 1, not episode 1, in part 1. We broke this up because it was just a whole lot of work being done, and I didn't want to have like a hour, 2 hour long episode. I think when everything was said and done, I had about 4 hours of gameplay recorded, and I ended up cutting a very good chunk of it. I mean, you're still seeing the important stuff, but I did end up cutting a huge chunk. But anyways, here in part 2, we do finish up the cargo hub. We also revisit some other spots in the city. And overall, I'm pretty happy with the end result. I think given what I had to work with, especially at the beginning of part 1, everything seems to be good. It seems to be pretty functional. I watched it run in the cargo hub. Everything seems to be fine. I don't see any indicators going off yet. Whenever we get to the live play, you'll see. So pretty happy with the way it turned out. Other spots of the city do have some issues like healthcare, some traffic jams here and there, death care, stuff like that. But those items are usually pretty easy to fix. We just have to put the buildings down and actually address the items. I typically ignore those for quite a while because I'm more of a city painter, as people would say. Like, I just like to build an interesting looking city, with the simulator being like a second or third option to me. I don't play this game probably how the creators intended it, but that's okay. It's my game. I can do what I want. But again, we'll get around to fixing all that stuff. I don't sweat that at all. My biggest concern is just making sure I have enough money to build what I want to build. So anyways, before we get too far into this episode, I wanted to make you guys aware, because you probably have already noticed, I'm changing how I'm doing things. Going forward, I think I'm going to change how I do things, because recently I've had some personal issues come up and they demanded a lot of my attention, so I've been away from my computer, let alone the game. I haven't been building near as much as I would like to be, but it is what it is. Life happens. And I came to a realization while I was away of just how much time I do spend editing and doing live plays, and I do it for minimal results, at least in my opinion. I'm grateful for every subscriber, comment, and everything I get, but I'm not like getting thousands or anything. So obviously the formula I have isn't great. So I'm just going to kind of cut back on, what's not working and see if this is a little bit better. Let me know what you guys think down below. Like, please give me a comment on what you like better. Do you like fast play commentary, live play commentary? We'll go from there. If you haven't noticed though, live play really isn't my strong suit. So I was thinking going forward, I was going to do things like this. I'm kind of stealing this from one of my favorite creators, Jeremy Thunder. I'll put a link to his channel down below. He does his videos in a similar method to this, where he does a bunch of live play and he talks over it, like most other creators, I believe. But then he ends it with the live play, going over everything he's built. And I really like the way he does it. And whenever I was trying that method with this, I noticed the editing process went much quicker and it was a lot smoother for me. I didn't have to find perfect cuts for my live play to have it make sense. Because if you haven't noticed, I'm not a good editor and I'm not a good public speaker, apparently. Yeah, so just in general, it was a little less stressful for me. So I'm thinking I'm going to try things this way for a little bit. It may not stay this way forever. I may go back to the old way of doing things. But I can say this did save me a lot of time once I sat down and actually started editing and doing things. And I will do my live plays here and there. They'll just be reduced, especially in this video. Like, really, especially in this video, it's 99% fast play. But I also don't plan on giving up the history lessons. I do plan to weave those into episodes going forward. If anything, I think this format's going to help, because when I make those, I feel a little rushed trying to fit them into certain fast play segments. So now, with episodes typically being anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes, I have a lot more freedom to sit here and give them the attention they deserve and stuff like that. It just makes it easier, because for me, it's easier to get the video edited, and then while I'm watching it, I can go ahead and comment on it. That just seems to be a little bit easier for me for some reason. But anyways, let me know what you guys think of the way we're doing things going forward, and hopefully understand why I'm doing things the way I am. But anyways, let's talk about some of the things that are going on screen. Alrighty guys, so during my personal rant, you probably watched me use the crap out of the surface tool, which I thought was to great effect out in the train yards. And I wasn't sure what surface to actually use in that area. I eventually settled on using CS2 for the surface because it just looked more natural and seemed to fit the area a little bit better than the others. I still prefer the gravel from CS1 with the surface brush, but the CS2 is definitely acceptable for now. Now I can see more surfaces coming out with mods and assets and eventually DLC. So, you know, I miss the brush, but the surface tool is also an acceptable tool to have right now. I'd like to have both because the brush can make more feathery edges. That's what I say, feathery edges, whereas the tool makes it pretty straight line. But, you know, let me know down below which one you prefer. So then I move on to this little area over here. Well, I say little, it's actually a pretty big area. I wasn't sure what to put out here originally. I do eventually settle on something later on, and I think it's pretty good, and it fits the area. I'll save it for later what I do. You may have saw earlier I put some specialized ore and oil industry into the cargo harbor area. I put that in there because I was hoping, well, when I zoomed out, it made sense the way it looked aesthetically, at least to me. I don't know if it does to you, but my city, my way. And I was hoping that they could build some pretty cool looking buildings and assets on that plot of land when they level up. I haven't seen like super leveled up or an industry level yet. I don't know if they make tanks and everything. I was hoping for like tankers and stuff like that. We'll see what we get, but it still kind of fits the theme, at least in my mind. So what we have now is I come back to our roads, and I want to get a parkway style road system along the shoreline here by the cargo terminal. For now, it's kind of acting like a placeholder. I don't finish shit up this episode, but I wanted to get this in before I got too far down the road and tried to squeeze it in later, because I'm notorious for that kind of stuff. So this is just acting as like a pseudo highway to get cargo in and out of the city proper, because it connects up down here where our old industry area is. And that's going to get gentrified and removed at some point. I just wanted to get that in there, and we're going to flush it out a little bit later. It's going to look a little bit cleaner than what it is now and probably be more efficient going forward. This is kind of the planning stages, so to speak, I guess. Just getting it in, making sure that it can function. I typically like to build those throughout my cities because I want to service my industry area with more than just one entrance and exit, because I don't want to bottleneck my highway. This just gives them another option to come and go from, because when I was playing CS1, and I'm assuming this has a somewhat similar concept, multiple entries and exits are very beneficial. So I'm not sure if that's how it works, but I did want that in the area to help out, because I know this area, that cargo hub area, is just going to explode with traffic soon enough. I put enough industry in there that it's just going to explode. So now we're just working on some more road ideas in the area. Nothing up here is really permanent. I was more or less just playing around in this area, trying to make sense of it, because it's a pretty awkward area. I don't know exactly how this area is going to end up looking, but what I did want to do is I wanted the roads to make some sense, and it'll probably make a lot more sense when we finally get that landfill moved. I don't move it right now because it's still servicing the community, and I need the recycling and or the incinerator to get up and running and catching up with garbage. So it's going to get moved sooner rather than later, hopefully, but for right now it's just a necessary evil that we have in the city. So yeah, anyways, at this time I was primarily focusing on getting decent road connections at least started, so that whenever I come back to it later, I don't have to completely rebuild the area, even though knowing me, I probably will. Yeah, just focusing on getting everything to make sense in this area, make sure that the connections were connected and they made some general sense, because this area I think is going to be probably the messiest part of the city, and that also makes sense because you have the cargo hub down there, and it's kind of the transition from this big industrial area into the city proper. So sometimes that does look messy because you're trying to fit all these things into one area. And then we come back up here into our hillside neighborhood, because I was looking at it and I was just like, I can fit a little bit more up and in there. So I tried to squeeze a few more roads and houses up and in. And I do a lot of work off screen on this neighborhood because when a house builds itself, it tears that terrain up something fierce. So it's a frustrating process, but what I'll typically do is I'll zone out the area, let the house build, and then I'll come back and smooth out the terrain and get it to not look so terrible. Like you're gonna see it right here. Look at how bad that is. I don't let anything like that fly. Like those, I actually end up fixing those a little bit later on in the episode, but what I do is I let it build out, and then off screen I'll go fix all that stuff, because that's an extremely tedious and boring process to do, and I don't want to bore you guys with anything other than my sad commentary. But yeah, I do like how this area turns out. A little bit later we start putting in services and everything so that people living here aren't miles and miles away from, you know, the basic essentials like a school and a police department and stuff like that. Because the idea behind this neighborhood, and I think I said in part 1, it's been a minute since I've even touched it. The idea behind this neighborhood was these are wealthy homeowners. They all had businesses down in the cargo hub, so they bought land up on that hill to kind of oversee everything. Here we go, starting to put in some of the services. Start with mailboxes, because that's one of the services I could see myself forgetting as I build the city. I can just easily see that I forget to put that kind of stuff in there. But anyways, yeah, the homeowners up there, they basically would own businesses down at the cargo harbor or in the city, and they bought land up on the hill and they built it up there just to be close to their businesses, but they're also uphill and upwind of it, so there's no pollution or anything blowing up into them and lowering their property values. In my mind, that would be one of those famous NIMBYs that you have in San Francisco. NIMBYs are notorious in San Francisco. I've been doing a little bit of reading. If you're not familiar, a NIMBY basically stands for Not My Backyard. And they're these HOAs typically, but they're associations of homeowners that they get together and they kind of bully city governments and other people into making sure that their property values are not touched by the community. They can get pretty ruthless, and San Francisco is notorious for it. So I don't know enough about NIMBYs to really make a comment on it. If you do want a YouTuber who does a lot on NIMBYs, or at least an episode or two on his channel, I believe it's City Beautiful. I'll put a link to his channel down below. He comments on the NIMBYs a whole lot, and he knows way more about it than I do. I do like his channel. He gives me some inspiration for stuff like this. So anyways, with all that rant and everything done, I think it's about time we get into our history lesson for the day. And today is going to be it's going to be about the gold rush, but it's going to be more about the everyday lives of the people who went there, not so much the historical facts like it was in the last one. I think we're going to focus on the people who went there, how they lived their lives, how the process worked and stuff like that. So we'll go ahead and dive right into that right about now. So the people who came into the area came to be known as 49ers because of the sheer volume of people who migrated to the region in 1849. It's estimated approximately 300,000 men from all around the world came into Northern California with the hopes of striking it rich. Some of these people included other Californians, Eastern Americans, Hawaii, which was then known as the Sandwich Islands, which I just wanted to let you know they were known as the Sandwich Islands at one time. Mexico, South America, Europe, and Asia. So quite literally, this was a worldwide phenomenon at the time. It was overwhelmingly men who moved into the area, with about it being 98% or so. Many of these men left behind their families with dreams to strike it rich out west in California, but most never came back, and if they did, many came back poorer than whenever they left. How these men got there varied. Many Eastern Americans had the option to go with the overland route using established trails from earlier migrations like the Oregon Trail. It was done on foot or horseback because the Transcontinental Railroad wasn't built yet. It wouldn't be built till 1849 as part of the impact of this gold rush. This journey was extremely rough and a dangerous one, and prompted many Americans to choose the alternative to go there via boat. And I know what you're asking, you're like, a boat? And yes, a boat. Let me explain. Many migrants opted to hitch a ride on a merchant vessel bound for California. Now, this was before the creation of the Panama Canal in 1914, so there were two options for them. You could either sail completely around South America and then back at the Pacific coast to California, which would take you about 6 months to do, Or you could sail through the Gulf of Mexico to Panama, get out on foot and cross the isthmus, and then get back on the boat and sail up the Pacific coast again. And this method took about 45 to 60 days, with about 20 days spent crossing the isthmus. So a lot of people opted for the Panama one because it was quicker, but it was also a little bit more dangerous. Whether you were coming from Panama or circumnavigating South America, the ships would land in the San Francisco harbor. So many of the ships came in, it clogged the harbor, and many ships were abandoned right where they anchored. These ships would be later used for land reclamation projects, and the remains of these ships are still being found today in the bay during excavations and surveying. Now, one of the more interesting aspects I found about this was the cost of the journey itself. When I was researching this, I found it could cost anywhere from $150 to $300 for a one-way trip to California in the early stages. And later on, prices would shoot up to $400 to $1,200 for the same travel. That's insane to me. In today's economy, this would be about $13,000 to $40,000 for a one-way trip. So that's pretty expensive, and it just shows you that they hedge their bets on this investment. Once they landed in San Francisco, many of the men found the city was very overcrowded, very underdeveloped, and extremely overpriced, much like today. Housing and supplies were in very short demand, and it led to many to just flee the city once they got there. They didn't even stay very long because it just wasn't hospitable for them. And that's not why they were there anyways. Now, the aforementioned gold fields weren't exactly at San Francisco's doorstep. A prospector would now have to walk to the Sierra Nevada mountain range, which is around modern-day Sacramento is where they'd head, and it's about 100 miles on foot, give or take. And once they're there, they begin the actual work of mining for gold. So they do all that work just to do more work. Now, the image of the 49ers are extensively associated with sifting or panning through water for gold. It's the image we think of for the gold rush, and that's for good reason. This was a major part of the process. Prospectors would pan for gold in streams or riverbeds, and when they found a good source, they would then set up more intricate devices such as a sluice or a long tom that process more material more efficiently. Eventually, this yielded fewer and fewer results, and other methods were soon adopted, such as hard rock mining. This is where they would mine into the mountain and take out a mineral known as quartz, because a lot of gold was contained within the quartz. And they'd either smash it or crush up the rock, or they'd use a substance of mercury to separate gold from the rock. Needless to say, this was extremely dangerous because mining is always dangerous, and also mercury tends to be very poisonous. So, there's that. Let's see. Miners were also very territorial at other prospecting locations, especially as time went on and the area became more crowded. It wasn't uncommon for fights to break out over what a miner would feel as encroachment onto his territory. And in the beginning, most miners were independent, but soon larger mining operations would move in, and they'd set up large-scale mining operations and end up employing these miners to work for them. So as time went on, the independent miner faded, and more corporations moved in. That's just how capitalism works, baby. Let's talk about the actual miner, though. Many miners would either die in the process of searching for gold or succumb to harsh environments. I don't want to paint this as a lovely picture. It was a very hard life. Malnutrition and disease were widespread in mining communities and claimed many lives. Mining camps were primarily just canvas tents or makeshift wooden buildings, and they often caught fire. Meals were often just local game, beans or bacon or whatever food they could cobble together, and they would suffer various diseases like scurvy, or they'd even just starve. And they did all that with the hope to strike it rich. At the end of all this, it's estimated over 750,000 pounds of gold was extracted during this rush. That's give or take on the numbers. And I've seen various numbers given for the value. I've seen some suggest 2 billion, some suggest in the high 100 millions. I feel comfortable saying it's somewhere between $1 billion to $2 billion worth of gold was extracted. So yeah, those are just some of the parts of being a 49er I found interesting, especially the travel part. I never even considered that until I started doing the research for this. You can find a whole lot more on this topic with some simple Googling. Later we'll talk about the impacts of the 1849 gold rush, such as the Compromise of 1850 and California becoming a state right before the Civil War, because that had an impact on American history. Civil War is a big deal. So yeah, that's it for today's history lesson. Hopefully you enjoyed it and found it informational. This is one of those historical events that always gets mentioned in history classes here in America, but seems to always get glossed over. So I just wanted to make sure that we properly highlighted it. and give you guys kind of a starting point of getting into this, because it's a very, very interesting topic. But with enough about history, because you guys are here for City Skylines content, so let's go ahead and get back into what I'm doing on screen. So what are we doing right now? You probably saw me working on the university again. I was finishing that up a little bit on the campus. I finally got in the football stadium, because every major American university needs a football team. It's just kind of the law of the land here. So I got that all finished up, and then while I was over there, a tornado ruined my sewage treatment, so I had to go and repair that. So thank you for that, Mother Nature. It's very kind of you. But what I'm doing now is I'm working on these wharves, and what I really liked about it is I was able to do a custom parking lot. This is the first custom parking lot I built, so it's a little rough around the edges, but I think I'll get better as time goes. And you can build these custom parking lots. There's a bunch of YouTube videos coming out now, but all you gotta do is get access to the dev mod, and it's basically just an asset where you draw and the parking lots fill in. And they are functional. They do connect to the road invisibly, so you don't see the road connection, but it is there. And then I just use some fences kind of tie that area up. I only put it on the side, on certain sides. I didn't want it completely surrounded in fences. I wanted to leave it nice and open, but I want that fence along the rail to just give that little barrier to keep the silly people from running onto the rails. I do build rails onto the wharves for some of the industries, because it makes sense for manufacturers to import and export via rail using those lines. They're purely aesthetic for the game. There's not going to be any actual trains going on them, but I still like the look of it. It's all aesthetic. So what I do now is I clear out that whole area to make room for the connections going over this water. This area becomes a little bit of a bottleneck because it's so tight, because this whole area right down here is going to be dedicated to the geothermal plant that I just leveled out. And then I've got to find a way to cross that little water source right there, the little inlet. And it's hard to do because I'll have the road there that turns into a bridge, and then I have the rails right there, and then I also have the power lines that come across. So I incidentally created a little bottleneck that I had to figure out how to work through. And basically I just got them all really close together, and I just bridged over. It looks good, but it was a little bit of a challenge, and there was some off-screen experimentation to make sure that everything looked good, because the real challenge came whenever I put this geothermal plant back in. It takes up a very large chunk of area, and then running anything on the back side of it tore up the terrain pretty bad. Like right now the terrain doesn't look good, it just kind of slopes into it. But then I had to make sure I could connect the wharves to the main road, because I needed more than just one or two connections in the area. I needed a couple. So I had to connect that road, and then I had to run the rail through the road, and then I had to connect the wharf rail lines down there for the industries up to the main rail line, while keeping the power lines looking somewhat good. And it was just a lot of work. It was a lot of manipulating to get it the way I wanted it to look, because I was adamant I wanted to keep those power lines there because I like the industrial feel they give to the area. That's the main rail line coming and going from the city for right now, so that had to be there. And then that road, I knew I wanted that road to stay close to the cargo area so that they could get their goods coming and going out. So now what we basically do is we connect up that main road for the wharves, and I just get picky with how this road connects. I end up doing some delete and recreate to make sure everything's nice, flat, and smooth, because I hate it whenever a road does a weird slope. It's like nails on a chalkboard. I can't stand it when they do that. So I do get this area nice, flat, and smooth. And then I just work that retaining wall a little bit. And I really like the look of the retaining walls on that road. I like having a retaining wall on one side because I can still see the road and I can see the wall itself. And to me, it just looks really good and clean. Doing double retaining walls, I know it happens. I just don't like the look of it. I prefer this. So then I go ahead and start working on the rail lines in this area. And I struggle with this a little bit to make sure, A, it looks natural. Well, primarily natural. There is no real B. I just wanted it to look good because this is purely aesthetic. Some off-screen experimentation done for this, but what I eventually settle on is a T-junction up on the main road and then a Y-junction going to the businesses. And I like the way it turned out. It's really simple, but but I think that's kind of how this would work in that area. I think they would just opt for a simple connection. The main struggle came from making sure those turns and curves weren't too tight for trains, but I think they're acceptable. What you probably saw me do there is I manually placed a warehouse down there, and I was able to do that using the developer mod. Again, well, it's not mod, just developer mode. I used developer mode to just search up the business, and I placed it down in that area. And that's really cool because now you can start picking the buildings that go in, similar to like Plot the Growables. But unfortunately, for the time being, you had to have zoning underneath those buildings. Otherwise, they will just abandon or have other problems. They don't function without the zoning underneath them for right now. I could see mod developers fixing that relatively quickly. So anyways, I thought I'd point that out. It's a nice little feature. I then flushed this area out. I really like the wedge I put in there between those train tracks. I think that looks really good with some of the bushes and trees and the sand that I put in there. But the next major development we have is I go ahead and put in a water treatment plant. I think it fits the area because of how the asset looks. I really like those tanks. I don't know what they're called. Let me know in the comments down below what those tanks on the right there are called. I know they have a specific name. But what I do is I just insert this and then I just kind of cut it into the landscaping, and I think it looks really good and it makes sense. I don't know how realistic it is, how I did this, but I think it looks aesthetically pleasing to have those retaining walls there. If you couldn't tell, I really like the retaining walls in this game. And then I just kind of flush this area out using the brush again. I really like how this area turned out with that brush. This is going to symbolize the end of the cargo hub. So a little bit of nature coming in is, in my opinion, a good thing. So yeah, we just touch up this area with a little bit of nature. And then what we do is we go ahead and take the surface tool and we go ahead and put some pavement underneath the clarifiers there. Took me a minute to remember what those were, but those are clarifiers. And I really think that touched that up quite nicely. Gives it a nice clean look. And then we move back over to our geothermal plant real quick. And I go ahead and put the sand 2 texture underneath it. And I opted for the sand 2 because it looks the most natural for this area. Because if I put pavement there, it's going to look weird with the plants and rocks sitting up on it. Plants don't typically grow through pavement. It's not something they typically do. But they do sometimes grow through sand, and it's not even just sand as much as it looks like dirt to me. I'm just going with what it looks like kind of thing. I kind of wish I could have feathered the texture there a little bit, but I couldn't figure out how to do it, especially with what I have right now. So I'm just opting to leave it as nice straight edges, and I might come back later and touch that up. I probably won't. Why am I lying to myself? Okay, so here we go ahead and expand on more wharves because I was about to end the episode, and then I realized just having those 3 wharves out there, it didn't look right to me, so I went ahead and added some more. And I'm pretty happy with how these end up turning out. I'm able to, you'll see me eventually run a rail down there and make my own little makeshift cargo hub. You'll see all that coming here in a little second. But this was so much easier to build with the new Anarchy and all the mods that we have now. Just so much easier to do. Here I am trying to run that rail. That might be a bit of a tight curve, but in my mind, the trains wouldn't be going very fast anyway, so they just take that curve at a nice slow pace. I'm sure there'll be an engineer somewhere out there who sees this video and they're just like, no, that would never happen in real life. And they're probably right, but this isn't real life. The physics in City Skylines is way different than our world. But what I'm doing here now is I'm still playing with the developer mod of placing particular buildings that I think work for this area. I was primarily using warehouses, but some of them look good, some of them don't. I end up taking a lot of these out and then just using props right here with the containers, and I just turn this into my own little makeshift cargo hub area with the train tracks back there and everything. I couldn't find a crane asset, which was very frustrating, but what does happen later on is the prop itself spawns a crane. You'll see that a little bit later if you have a good eye for things. So then what we basically do is we just put some more businesses in this area that makes sense, and then I go ahead and texture this out and I put parking lots in here, and I'm really, really happy with the way these turn out. I go ahead, I find these diagonal or angle parking spaces, and I fit them in just like I would in Skylines 1, and I think they look great. I even put some parking here on the back because I think this area would have the parking for the workers and anybody who has to come here for business. And here I just play around with adding a little bit more train tracks. I don't get too crazy with it. I don't think this area would go crazy with train and rail anyways. And we just kind of touch up the terrain here, making it look good. If you zoom in really close on some of the intersections of the rail with the road, there's a little bit of clipping with the walls. I don't love it, but I'm accepting it for right now. If we had something like Node Controller, it'd be real easy to fix. So for right now, I'm just accepting the clipping, and maybe one day we get something like Node Controller in this and we can fix it. It doesn't affect the play, and you have to really look to see it. Like, you have to be really picky to even notice it. You probably can't notice it from this view at all, honestly. So yeah, that basically is the cargo hub area right there, the one we built. And then I realized I had some additions I had to make to the actual cargo hubs, so I just come in here and I finish those out. And we'll get into the live play here in a second so we can talk about everything and look it over. Alrighty guys, so we are finally done building, and I gotta say I'm pretty happy with what we have here. I think it's a pretty good hub, if I do say so myself. We took the inspiration of Pure 80 and we just kind of ran with it. So let's go ahead and do a quick overview of everything we've done. Let's start up here on this hill. Again, just a neighborhood for all the rich people doing rich people things up here. This area is going to get reworked. This is just a temporary solution for right now. And then coming down here, we have our wharves, and I'm really happy with the way some of these turned out. Like, this one looks good to me with the parking there. I like this one. It's a little weird, but I really like how the rail comes in and then splits and creates a little key wall right there. This one probably looks the most realistic to me though, with the parking that I was able to fit in there. And then over here, this one's just awesome because of this crane and everything. And again, the idea behind this is a makeshift cargo hub. All the containers sit here and they get on these trains and they get exported. We made our own little makeshift hub. We have our geothermal plant over here doing its thing. It is producing us a lot of electricity now, so pretty happy with that. Down here we have our actual cargo, ship cargo terminals. And we got our warehouses added on. It makes this area look just a little bit cleaner with those nice clean edges. And I like the asymmetry here actually. I think this looks really good. This area might get cleaned up at some point, but for right now it's perfectly fine. Up here we got our rail yard. Really like how this is looking. I like our new X junctions that we've figured out how to put in. So I think this is looking good. I do wish we could remove the trees, but it is what it is. I can live with that necessary evil. And then we end things with a cargo terminal over here, which I think this looks pretty good as well, with our sunken terminal over here. And every time I load the game, these nodes break. This happens every time I load the game up. I don't know why. I'll figure that out later, but you guys saw it on screen. So yeah, that's pretty much everything we did. I'm pretty happy with how things turned out. If you guys are happy with the way things turned out, let me know in the comments down below, and I'll see you guys in the next one.